Okay, back again. This is Mr. Side with another exciting AP Euro Post Napoleon video. This is the third part in our series. In this particular video, we're going to look at the concert of Europe, a little bit about the Holy Alliance. We're going to focus mainly on the uprisings of the 1820s and the uprisings of the 1830s, and I'm going to make a special point to highlight the Works Consulted page, because much of the clips you're going to see in this particular PowerPoint come from the work of Mrs. Suzanne Poyer. So I will, though I've never met the woman, I will definitely give her props for all the videos, or all the PowerPoints she puts up on the internet. So take a look at the last slide, so I give thanks to her and others who have helped here. Let's get started. So the concert of Europe focuses mainly on the principle of collective security. It's established in the era right after the Congress of Vienna. And our goal in this system is to ensure that the major provisions of the Congress of Vienna and the goals and the hopes of the Quadruple Alliance are protected. So this system calls for the meetings, and you see that on the screen here, a couple of the Congress sessions that take place at different points in Europe. The main goal, again, to define and monitor the status quo, to hold back liberalism and nationalism wherever they can. We will see the Holy Alliance be born. This is something proposed by Alexander I in 1815. Russia, Prussia, and Austria are the only nations that really sort of take it seriously. It's an idea of interventionism, that they will intervene wherever they have to uphold Christian principles, although one can question how intervention on people's freedoms does so. But this is something put forth by Alexander I, where he sort of becomes the policeman of Europe. Opponents will see this as a clear sign of an unholy alliance between different Eastern European monarchies against liberty, against progress, against the achievements of the last couple hundred years. Not taken very seriously in the West. And as we'll see, the British will actually leave this when other European forces intervene in Spain. The British were opposed to doing so, and they will actually leave this Congress system. We have some rumblings in the 1820s and the 1830s. We'll see uprisings in Spain, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. I got Naples down there, and Piedmont as well will all be put down. England is against the intervention of Spain, leaves the Congress system. That's where we'll wind up getting the Monroe Doctrine, actually in conjunction with the United States. Monroe will put out his own philosophy on this. Okay, 1821, 1829, we get a defining and important event here. This is revolution of the Greeks against the Turks. It's the beginning of the crumbling of the Ottoman Empire. It had been sort of in decline for a while. Now we will start to get nationalistic movements erupting within the Ottoman Empire. What'll be important about that, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but the key piece there is that conservative European forces who are supposedly against liberalism and uprisings and nationalism support the revolution in Greece and actually send troops. England, France, and Russia will send troops to defeat the Ottomans. They will also send naval forces, and we'll see there they have down the Treaty of Adrianople, but I believe the Treaty of London 1830 actually grants independence to the Greeks. Finally, in the 1820s, we'll see a Decembrist revolt in Russia, in which primarily Russian officers who are fresh back from France and who have been breeding liberal ideology decline to take an oath to Nicholas I. They had essentially wanted another person to take the throne, and it leads to some bloodshed and exile into Siberia. But an interesting event nonetheless. So we'll talk about that, then we'll get into the revolutions of 1830. So let's take a look at some of these early events. We've got uprisings in Spain, Piedmont, Sardinia. We'll see also Naples. There'll be some things going on there. The revolutions in Greece and the Decembrist revolts that will also take place. Now, as revolutions are going on in Spain, and the French actually intervene and restore Bourbons to the throne in Spain. We'll see the Austrians get involved as well in the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. We will see revolutions take place in Central and South America. And this is where the British, this is where the British and the Americans, those Yanks that are sort of a brand new country, we will see them put up barriers to other European countries attempting to come in and take over these territories. And we see that most elegantly put forward in the Monroe Doctrine, which none of the European countries actually take seriously, except when the British back it with the power of their navy. That's the only real reason why the Monroe Doctrine is supported at first. Here we see just some movements in the Balkan region, Serbia area down the Danube, and certainly Greece in the 1830s. So, what makes Greece different? Well, let's take a look here. Let's pause the video right now and go ahead and analyze this painting. Some interesting things with this painting. They are depicting, brutal treatment of the Greeks at the hands of the Turks. Ancient Greece represents the birth of Western culture and society, and so there was a natural connection between these nations in the West and Greece. They saw an opportunity to unite with other Christians against Muslim Turks, and they got involved because they saw it as an opportunity to strike against the Turks. This will bring up for us, though, certainly the Eastern question. And the Eastern question refers to trying to figure out who is actually going to gain from these Ottoman losses. We will see here now, in the rest of this course, in other chapters, particularly when we get into nationalism and imperialism, and you're getting into the birth of World War I, who is going to fill the gap? As the Ottomans retreat, who fills the void? Austria and Russia, who are united right now in this whole idea of the Holy Alliance, will actually become enemies and be competing with each other over who gains some of this territory here. We see in the rest of this slide just some details about battles that take place, the British, French, and Russians fighting against the combined Ottoman-Egyptian fleet. Later on, the Russians directly declaring war on the Ottomans. This leads to the Greeks gaining independence. And this is an important moment because we will see 3 out of the 5 of the big 5 who are conservative and against nationalism and against these revolutions supporting this movement. Lord Byron, important figure, literary figure of the time period, actually goes and fights in Greece and is killed. We'll be reading some of his works during our talks on Romanticism. Now to Russia. 1825, we see liberal ideology having permeated the borders of Russia, and individuals in Russian society enjoying some of the ideas of the French Revolution. There's a controversy that emerges of who was going to succeed Alexander I. Some people wanted one guy. Ultimately, Nicholas I gets it. A contingent of Russian officers did not want to pay allegiance to Nicholas. They sort of march into the square, and Nicholas' forces violently put them down. There are many casualties, many people wounded. The ringleaders are hung. Many of the officers are sent with their families into exile in Siberia. We'll see that being a common theme that happens in Russian history here, people being sent to Siberia. But this uprising is not forgotten. It's not forgotten by the liberals in Russia, and it's certainly not forgotten by Nicholas, who, while not exactly being a softie, was into, let's say, some ideas of reform, or at least was lukewarm to it. And we'll see here, he will become much more of a reactionary because of the events that take place in Russia there. Now on to 1830, where we will see several uprisings. Surprise, surprise, we see these beginning again in France. they will spread to Belgium and also to Poland, where they will in fact be the bloodiest. There will also be some uprisings in some of the Austrian-held territories as well. So what causes these? Well, if we look at France, we will go into some detail later about Charles X and him coming to the throne, trying to reverse some of the gains of the French Revolution, and him being sort of kicked out by the workers of Paris. Upper middle class elements will support Louis Philippe, Charles's cousin. The revolution will spread to Belgium and to Poland. Okay, so let's take a look at some slides. Again, these are not slides that I created. I've taken them from another PowerPoint prepared by Mrs. Suzanne Poyer. Okay, so here we go. Louis XVIII comes to power after Napoleon. He comes to the throne, has to escape for a little while during the 100 Days, is put back on the throne. Nonetheless, France emerges out of this Congress of Vienna as the most liberal state in Europe, the most liberal of the large, powerful states. Louis XVIII, despite the calls of relatives and other royalists to kind of put back an absolute monarchy, he recognizes, maybe more so than any of the other monarchs in Europe, that liberalism was here to stay and that it was going to be around for a while. So he's going to rule as a constitutional monarch. His power is somewhat limited. There is legislative power. There are civil rights protected. The Napoleonic Code, perhaps the one most important accomplishment of Napoleon, is going to be guaranteed. But that doesn't mean that this is going to happen easily or that everyone's going to go along with it. France will be divided. We are going to see a group known as the Ultras, who are going to be ultra-reactionary, ultra-conservative, who want to destroy any and all ideas and memories of the French Revolution, actually strike against the force of liberalism. We will see royalist mobs attack former revolutionaries and liberals. We'll see ultras, because of that, rejected in the Chamber of Deputies in favor of more moderate figures. And so as a result of all this, we will see the middle class have much more say and much more power in this post-Napoleonic era. Now, as time goes on, the left, in this case, the left refers to liberals, come under attack, and Louis XVIII is pushed to move closer to the right. They change who's eligible to vote, who can actually hold office. There's some controls put in place on what can be said in universities and what can be published. This is around the time that we'll see the French actually intervene in Spain, which causes certainly some rumblings by the liberals. Now, in 1824, we see that Louis dies. Charles X comes to the throne, and certainly we know, as the former leader of the Ultras, he is no fan of liberalism. So, when he begins to push further and further against liberal ideology and attempt to sort of almost, create a program that's going to move him back on the path to absolute monarchy. Certainly, as we see in this painting here, he's trying to embody some of the elements of Louis XIV, that absolute monarchy. He's actually going to take power in something like a 4 or 5 hour ceremony. 4 or 5 hour crowning ceremony that beckons the days, of the old ancient regime. And he's going to put people like him into his cabinet. That's not going to be very popular. Okay, so here's when things really begin to heat up. In 1830, liberals are elected into into government, and Charles can't stand the fact that this is happening. So he puts forward his July ordinances. He dissolves the entire parliament. He puts even stricter censorship laws in place. Wants to completely change the voting laws so that he can ensure a conservative, reactionary government. This will not stand in the eyes of the people. The people of Paris react. Here we see the very famous painting, Liberty Leading the People, which is to illustrate the glory of the Revolution of 1830. And this is uber romantic, right? The glory of throwing one's life down for the cause of liberty. In the hayfire and the fog of war of this revolution, Charles is forced to flee, and the middle class come in here, and they see an opportunity to gain leverage, and they select Louis Philippe from the Orleans family. He's connected to the Bourbons, but he's not an ultra, and he's seen as more of a moderate. He's seen as a bourgeoisie kind of guy, and so to the middle class, he's one of theirs. His program calls for the following: reduction of property qualifications, so this is going to increase the amount of people who are able to vote. A freedom of the press, in terms of this, abolishing the censorship. A sort of enlightened view that you rule by the will of the people, not by the will of God, so sort of banishing that divine right of kings beliefs. He even brings back the tricolor flag, and so he sort of takes the nickname the Citizen King, and certainly now the wealthy bourgeoisie, middle class, are in power. And he's going to reign from 1830 to 1848, and he's initially very popular. However, we will see some problems on the way. We can certainly see by this caricature here that many elements in society, particularly the sort of former sans-culottes, the sort of workers living in the cities, they saw him as a fat, overprivileged friend of the bourgeoisie. And we get the beginnings of class warfare here, sort of the separation between those workers in the cities and the middle class who are benefiting from their efforts. We see a series of strikes and uprisings take place around the countryside, and Louis Philippe has to move to the right in putting down these acts, and you begin to get some rumblings, some things going on. So we will see that Louis Philippe, though he will come to power, and that the Revolution of 1830 is successful in France, and also we'll see it be successful in Belgium, it is not without its issues. And those will certainly come to life in 1848. Now, quickly as we look here through Belgium, there were big differences between the Northerners, the Dutch, and the predominantly French Catholics in the South. They did not get along. We can go back to the days of, the Spanish occupation, where we had a sort of a divided Holland and Belgium. It does not go so well when they're unified after the Congress of Vienna. They can't seem to make it work. They can't. Again, these forces of nationalism are at work, and they see themselves as two different peoples. This leads to an uprising, and a successful uprising, in a separation of Holland and Belgium. The bloodiest, by far the bloodiest of the 1830 revolutions take place in Poland. The Poles, who saw themselves as a unique group living within Russia, had certain privileges under Alexander I. They do not like Nicholas I, and they will rebel as time goes on. Particularly in the area around Warsaw, people had seen themselves as having a semi-autonomous status. They were ruled by the Russians, but they had their own constitutions. They could do their own thing. But as Alexander the First dies and Nicholas the First sort of takes control, the tide turns, and the people of Poland begin thinking about revolution. As rumors swirl back and forth about interventions in Belgium and in France, some Polish secret societies see this as an opportunity to push for independence. This will be put down. It does take some time. It does not happen overnight. Nicholas I has to concentrate a big chunk of his forces in putting this down. And the Poles had thought others would come to their aid. They did not get aid quickly enough. The French and English will not come help them. Kind of eerie of a reminder of what's going to happen about 90 or so years later with the first blitzkriegs of World War II, in which the Poles hope for the French and British to intervene, and they do not quickly enough. It takes the Russians a while to put this rebellion down. The irony being that because it takes them so long, Nicholas I cannot, work through this idea of the Holy Alliance. He can't put it into action. He cannot get to Belgium to help Holland, and therefore the Poles' sacrifice does not go unrewarded, and that the Belgians are able to gain independence. The Belgians later on will be declared neutral by the British. Again, something that will be important for us as we get closer to World War I and World War II. So, what are the results? There's a period of recovery that does take place in between all these years of violence and the revolution and the wars. The Concert of Europe is somewhat successful in keeping people in check. Not all the reforms, though, as much as they'd like to see the liberal reforms reversed, many of them do actually stay in place. Many of them, even if they are not freedoms that people get, they're certainly in the air. The liberal ideology, national ideology, is in the air, and it certainly will challenge these plans the conservatives had. The revolutions are mainly only successful in Western Europe. The middle class gains the most from them. The urban lower classes see themselves as having spilled a lot of blood but not made any gains, and you'll see this class warfare playing into some later revolutions, particularly 1848. And here is our map of 1830. We see the green or turquoise color highlighting pockets of revolution in France and Belgium and in Poland. These are sort of urban uprisings that are not necessarily supported out in the countryside, because many of the peasantry enjoyed or at least were in line with the conservative way of thinking. And as I said in the intro here, let's take a moment to thank some of the folks that have put some resources out there on the internet. Suzanne Poyer, who operates that great website, historyteacher.net, and has some great resources for AP students that we've used already. The McKay text that we use in class, and the source notes by Mr. Stephen Mercado, the history sage, who also has a great a website there and some resources that you can purchase and use. And we'll be coming to you shortly with another installment of the Post Napoleonic World, Part 4 coming up.